We homebrewers love a good IPA, but the problem with a good IPA is that you have a couple good IPAs and you end up on your bum and you can't wake up for work properly the next day. So how do we remedy that? We could stop drinking the beer, but let's be real, that's not gonna happen. So what do? We fix it. This right here is a full-bodied, full flavor IPA, but this comes in at a sessionable 3.5%. Let's show you how we made it. Now the trickiest part with making this beer is going to be keeping everything in balance, because normally when you make an IPA, you can make it really boozy, you can jam a whole bunch of grains in there, and that grain maltiness and then the booze is all gonna balance with the extreme amount of IBUs and hops to create a well-finished product. We are missing one of those elements today, and that is the booze, and that's driven by the body and the grain. So I guess two of the elements of the triangle really. So we're gonna have to do a few things to make up for that and maintain our body despite the fact that it's gonna be low in alcohol. To do that, we're gonna be running with 83.5% of our grain brewing, just regular pale ale malt. 6.5% is going to be light Munich malt, and that's gonna help give us some maltiness, some character, and some chewy factor in the mouth, I suppose, to help maintain a sense of body despite this being low ABV. 5% each is then gonna be medium crystal malt and dextrin malt. In this case, it's gonna be Gladiator dextrin malt. The dextrin there is key because this is gonna be low in alcohol. There's gonna be quite a large amount of hops in there, which is gonna help kill the head retention and the body. The dextrin malt is gonna help us try and maintain that. So we still have some creamy, not creamy factor, but some body, some retention, something to chew on. So this isn't just thin and weak and, you know, lackluster. Anyway, let's get all this stuff crushed and then we can talk about mashing. And now, let's mash in. Now, as per always, before we actually start brewing, we need to make sure that we've adjusted our water chemistry, unlike what I did with the blood orange NEPA. Link to that video up there. Completely biffed it on the water chemistry side of things. So I've got my checklist today. I'm gonna make sure I don't forget anything. But first we need to add 0.5 ml of phosphoric acid just to adjust our pH a little bit, because there's not a lot of there's no roasted malts or anything in here, so we need to make sure that we lower it within the realms of what we're actually after. I then also need to throw in all my salts, which is gonna be 87 parts of calcium, 5 of magnesium, 15 of sodium, 67 chloride, 136 sulfate, and 57 parts per million of bicarbonate. The important ratio to keep in mind here is the 2:1 of sulfate to chloride, because we want to emphasize the crispness of this beer. We want the hops to shine in a really vibrant fashion. So unlike with a NEPA, we're going for the bitter or dry style, because that's going to help the crispness of the hops really pop out of the glass here, as well as help us get more out of them without having to use quite so much. Now, the tricky part about making a low alcohol beer is keeping everything in balance, as I mentioned. And traditionally, if I was gonna make a West Coast IPA, which is effectively what this is, just a session version, I would be mashing it in around 65 degrees Celsius. For the Americans in our audience, Freedom units will show up all over the screen throughout the video, obviously. But here's the problem with that. I could theoretically just dial down all the grains enough that we end up with a 3.3% IPA and I do everything else as normal. But then we lose our balance because we're not gonna have enough body, we're not gonna have enough head retention, and we're gonna have this kind of weird thin beer that's really just tasting like hop water in a really bad way, or like weak hop juice, but not like a NEPA, just like a really bitter, gross, astringent type thing. So we need to maintain our body to keep everything in check. And the way we're gonna do that is mashing really hot. I'm gonna mash at 70 degrees Celsius, that in Freedom units. And that's gonna mean that, yes, we're gonna have very little enzyme activity. So we're gonna reduce the amount of fermentable sugars we've got at the end of our beer. And that means we're gonna have sugars maintaining at the end to give us that head retention and to give us that mouthfeel and body. So it sounds weird, but we need to mash really hot, hotter than most stouts, to make sure that we have body at the end of this to make this a well-balanced session IPA. Now, enough talking, let's actually get into mashing, shall we? Alrighty. Now, as per always, throw in a little bit of grain at a time, then give it a good mix. If you're new to brewing, this just helps to prevent dough balls, which is when you get a clump of grain, wet on the outside, dry on the inside, you lose efficiency, and you're not getting as much beer out of your grains as you should. So by doing a little bit at a time, giving it a quick blitz, or giving it a mix if you're using a traditional mash paddle, that lets you just maximize on the efficiency of your beer. Let's blitz away. Now that is mashing basically done there. We're happy to go ahead and pop our top filter screen on now. If you don't have a setup like this, that is totally fine. The only purpose of this is to help prevent any of these grains getting back down this center tube here, because we've got an inbuilt pump at the bottom of this Brewzilla. We don't want any grains going into that. So now we can start recirculating this to help increase efficiency, help increase clarity, because the grains themselves act as kind of a natural filter. So it's going to help clear up our beer. Now, about a year ago, or close to a year ago now, we had the awesome opportunity to make a beer with pro brewers. So shout out to our friends over at Santa Fe, Zach and Chris, Santa Fe Brewing in New Mexico, because I learned quite a lot from that experience. One of which was a little bit of medium crystal malt goes quite a long way, both in terms of coloring the beer, final mouthfeel, and residual sweetness and chewy factor. Now there's a difference between normal sweetness and like medium crystal malt sweetness, and what we learned from that experience was 5% of crystal malt seems to be like the magic number to hit if you're going for like an old school balls to the wall West Coast IPA. So what I'm hoping with here is that by mashing high, keeping that 5% of medium crystal and bumping up the dextrin, the dextrin malt to 5%. When we did it with them, we used 3%. I hope that all of that is going to mean that this mouthfeel and body of the beer is going to be quite similar to that Fiesta Wombat collab beer that we made all that time ago. I hope it comes out similar to that, just low in ABV. I'll be very, very happy if that's the target that we hit. Now we're gonna let this mash at, as I said, 70 degrees Celsius for 1 hour. That's gonna be followed by a mash out at 77 degrees Celsius for 15 minutes. And at the end of all of that, we can start sparging and move on to our hops. The one good thing about making session IPAs on the brew day itself is that you have a very light grain bill. So this suddenly becomes extremely easy, unlike all the other times where I've had to set up like a winch and a pulley system and everything. So that's nice. Now we're gonna, by the way, I forgot to say earlier, we did 30.5 liters of strike water. We're gonna do the exact same again of sparge water, and have already added our acid and our salts, so water chemistry is all accounted for. Let's start running that over the top. If you are new to this amazing, amazing world of homebrewing, sparging is basically wringing out the sponge. So I always like to liken it to when you're cleaning a car. You dunk your sponge in a bunch of soapy suds, you squeeze it out, and then you put it in clean water and squeeze it out again, you still get more suds. That's kind of the same thing we're doing here. This grain is the sponge. It's got a bunch of sugar trapped inside it, which is draining out right now, as you can probably hear. But even after all that liquid, that first wort has drained out, we still have a whole bunch of sugar that's trapped in these grains, and we want to get that out because that's going to help increase our efficiency and give us more beer than what we paid for. So running this 30 liters over the top is basically going to help just extend how much beer we can actually get. If you don't have the ability to do sparging, that's totally fine. The recipe will be adjusted for you as well to do a no sparge method. And obviously the full recipe will be in the link down below. As well, I'll link to our Patreon if you want to help support this channel and get more behind the scenes and get more directly involved with us, as well as pick up some merch if you'd like to. Some beer banter and bloody good times, tees and jumpers are all up on our website, link down below. After we have finished sparging all of this stuff through, we can move on to talking about the real kicker of what an IPA is, and that's hops. As you can see, we are now boiling, so it's time to add our first bittering hop addition, which is going to be 10 grams / about 0.3 of an ounce or 1/3 of an ounce of Fuggles. That's going to go in for 60 minutes and give us 3 IBUs. We'll come back towards the 10-minute mark for the rest of the hops. We have now been boiling for 55 minutes, so it's time to throw in our 5-minute addition of hops, which is going to be 57 grams / 2 ounces each of Centennial, Lupo Max Citra, and Lupo Max. Wow, that scared the crap out of me for a second. I was looking at you guys and then I saw this thing just bubbling up like a big angry green monster. Wow. Okay, cool. And 57 grams of Lupomax Mosaic. So the two Lupomaxes for the Mosaic and the Citra, regular for Centennial. The idea here being I want this to be an old school style West Coast IPA, but just really low on the booze. So I'm going, the Centennial is gonna give us that pungentness, that resininess, that pine and kind of earthiness to it, that little bit of grunge to it that I feel like the West Coast kind of have. And then the Citra and the Mosaic are obvious choices. Like Citra is just classic IPA style, heaps of citrus, tropical fruits, etc. A bit of everything you need in an old school IPA, and that Mosaic, I think will just round things out nicely. Mosaic is such a unique hop. It's got so many different flavors, but if it lends a little bit of that berry and kind of sweet, kind of stone fruit character, I think that will kind of bunch up really nicely with the citrus and with the resininess and the pineness. So all that being said, it's gonna give us 40 IBUs, so pretty big addition on this one. And when we've gotten to flame out, we're gonna start cooling down for a whirlpool. We've now reached our target whirlpool temperature, and I popped on the whirlpool arm to help get a bit of a circular movement going here so that we can make sure we get a nice healthy trub cone in the middle and we don't end up blocking up our pump. I'm now going to be throwing in, once again, the same additions, 57 grams / 2 ounces each of Centennial, and then Lupomax Citra and Lupomax Mosaic into the whirlpool they go. That's gonna be our last hop addition for the day. Once this is sat there for about 20 minutes, we'll move on to cooling down for yeast pitching. And the reason we're doing a whirlpool right now, because this is still gonna add IBUs, by the way, this is gonna add about 14 IBUs. So despite the fact that it's a whirlpool, you still get a level of isomerization out of this at these temperatures. But the reason that I'm doing this, and this is gonna be a grand total of 57 IBUs, which is pretty high for a low alcohol beer. So I'm really hoping the body can hold up to the bittering units on this one because it's pretty substantial. It's about on par or close to being on par with what the collab beer was with Santa Fe. So I hope the body holds up here. But the whole idea behind doing it as a whirlpool is that we can try and do more with less, if you understand what I mean. I need to throw a lot of hops into this to make it an IPA and make it feel like an IPA, obviously, but I can't keep throwing all the stuff in whilst we actually have the boil running because we're just gonna get so many bittering units out of this thing, it'll be undrinkable. And the lower the alcohol is, the easier it is to get bittering units, to get IBUs out of stuff. So by doing this last edition as a whirlpool, we might be able to protect our beer a little bit more from that additional bittering, because originally this was just gonna be a flame out edition until I saw just how bitter it would make the beer. So hopefully this keeps everything in that IPA robust balls to the wall realm without actually like being mouth puckeringly bitter. Anyway, once this is done with 20 minutes, we'll come back to talk yeast. We are now finally coming out at yeast pitching temp, so we can at long last start our transfer. It has been a bit of a long day, but we are on the home stretch now. Whoops, I've got a bit of a kink on the pump line there. There we go, we're transferring, nice. The final gravity, well the original gravity I should say, is coming out at 1.035. So we're 3 points above target. I was aiming for 1032 to give us a 3.3% beer. 1035 is gonna give us, if all things finish out where I think it will, around 1.008, should give us a 3.5% beer, which is still extremely low for an IPA. So if we can finish up there, I'll be very, very happy. Now we can talk about yeast. There's many options we could go with here. Like we could go an SO4, a USO5, we could go with Pomona, which we've been using a lot of our hazies lately. But for me, my favorite go-to West Coast, like old school IPA yeast has always been Verdant. I really, really like Verdant IPA yeast. It gives a really awesome tropical fruit flavor. It kind of goes towards apricots and just generic fruit salad, which is amazing, gives excellent esters. It's also very fast fermenting, but it also does leave a little more malt profile and a little more body than some other yeast strains, particularly American IPA yeast strains. It won't ferment it out quite as dry as what some other ones do, despite the fact that it's an aggressive fermenter. So I think Verdant IPA yeast is gonna be the go-to. I'm gonna run with 3 packets today, which should be more than enough for something with such an incredibly low gravity. And then once the transfer is finished, we can pitch it And then the next time that you guys see me will be when we're ready to dry hop. Actually, just before I let you go for the day, it's worth mentioning that there is a lot of stuff to clean here. We always do double brew days, so there's always a lot of stained and dirty stainless steel at the end of it. So if you want to know how we clean up our equipment quickly and easily as possible, link to that video up there on how to clean your brewery equipment the CIPA and basically the lazy and easy way. Now, the next time you guys see me, it will be when we're ready to dry hop. It is now day 6 of fermentation, and fermentation has basically stopped. There hasn't been much activity coming out of the fermenter itself. We look like we're at final gravity, which is around 1.01 at the moment, which I'm very happy with. It means we retained a lot of body and a lot of mouthfeel is still going to be hanging in there despite the fact that it's low ABV. But I do really wish that I dropped my wrapped peel into this tank. I do have a second one now that I'm going to be using in future brews inside the stainless steel, but yeah, it would have been nice to be able to track that fermentation curve because I think it was basically all blasted through in like the first 2 days. But if you want to check out what the wrapped pill is, link to that video up there. Right now, it is time to talk dry hops, and we are working with 85 grams / 3 ounces each of Centennial, Lupo Max Citra, and Lupo Max Mosaic. So I'm hoping that the end result of this is going to give us quite a fruity finish. The Centennial is still going to give us that element of spice and resininess, I believe, but there's going to be so much Citra and Mosaic in here. I think we're really going to do an excellent job of leaning into that old school kind of dank / fruity IPA, which is really what this is supposed to be. Now let's throw all the hops in the dry hopper up top. If you're not seeing this before, basically means that I can flush this out with CO2 after sealing it up so that I can do 0 oxygen dry hopping, which is particularly important with IPAs. If you want to see a full video on how to protect your beers and make sure that you make the best IPAs possible and all that kind of stuff, link to that video on up there. Oxygen protection is one of those tips. Now, I'm going to purge this out with CO2 and we can be done for the day. And now, hops away. That's always so satisfying. So I suspect that final gravity is going to be somewhere around 1.008 if we're lucky. Hopefully it doesn't get much lower than that, which means that after we've thrown these hops in, I'm now going to bump up the temperature by 2 degrees for a diacetyl rest for 2 days, followed by a cold crash. And then the next time you guys see me, I'll be holding a fresh pint of extremely low ABV Session IPA. And here is our final result. Saved it, mate. But there it is. It is a very pretty beer. So this thing here is a beautiful, bright yellow to orange kind of color. The head retention works. So adding that dextrin malt absolutely saved this thing. That higher temperature mash definitely helped out with that. This thing is fluffy and it hangs around for a very, very long time. But let's go in for the flavor, shall we? Okay, it's good. It's got that slight dankness and then very citrus forward, like old school citrus, grapefruit notes coming through. Vaguely kind of floral, fruity zestiness, but it's primarily that kind of pungent resin character that the old school IPAs have, followed up by that wave of grapefruit style citrus. So it is a classic old school IPA, just way lower in the ABV. This thing came out at 3.5%, as we said in the cold opener. The only note for improvement that I have on this one right here is it's got body, but I want a bit more body. So my alteration that I'd make to this recipe would be to add maybe more crystal malt, more caramel-based malts to boost that sweetness a bit and boost that extra chewiness on the body, and probably even go 1 degree higher on the actual mash temperature. Bump it up to 71 degrees Celsius, which is extremely high, but this thing did ferment down to 1.008, so it was still absolutely fermentable, and the yeast does have an easier time when you're working with a lower gravity beer. But all in all, a very, very good result here. I'm very happy with this. I know that I can have these on a school night and still wake up for work the next day, but I don't have to scrimp on the flavor for this one, which is one of the beautiful things about being able to create your own. So thank you so much, guys. Cheers. We'll catch you next time.